Greetings, fellow songwriters and seekers, and welcome back to Muse and Measure. If you haven't done so yet, please hit the subscribe button down below and join us for future insights into songwriting and spirituality. That's exactly what I want to talk about today, is the spiritual side of the scales. We've talked in the past about how Pythagoras, by taking a monochord and shortening it by half, and then that by half, was able to find all these intervals of the scale. And he really believed that there was some kind of spiritual connection to this, that it was connected to something greater. And he theorized that the ratios between the different note vibrations were the same as all the planets. So it became the music of the spheres. And even Johannes Kepler extended this and thought that the velocity of the planets, so the way they moved, created a kind of resonance and vibration in the universe. Which we couldn't hear, unfortunately, because of the empty space, but that music was still there. Now, this kind of spiritual and musical view of our cosmos and the nature of reality died out with Isaac Newton, because he basically said it was a myth. But I think we can still kind of use that metaphor to think about the scale and the notes that we're using in a spiritual sense to make us pay attention to what's going on with the notes. And so we don't just think of them as just boring old scales that we're going to just, use and manipulate for our purposes of making a melody. It's kind of fun to dwell on the notes and dwell on the intervals a little bit so that we can get a sense of what they mean in and of themselves, but also in relation to the other notes of the scale. And Indian classical music, which is such a vast discipline that I definitely am not claiming to be any kind of expert on it. It's something that I've studied a little bit of and am just a great admirer of. It's just some of my favorite music in the world. I've had some of my peak spiritual experiences listening to Indian classical music. And I even wrote about it in my, my book, On Becoming Music, that I wrote with Peter Price a long time ago. If you want to check that out, I'll put a link down below. In Indian classical music, they have certain ideas about, each raga, which is a set of notes, and certain rules about how the notes are supposed to be performed. They are all trying to create a rasa, or a mood, or a feeling. And so they have this idea of Vādi, which is kind of the core, or the anchor of the raga, which is related to the self. It's like the spiritual core, the soul of the piece. And to complement that, in order for the soul or the self to have any meaning at all, it has to have a contrary, an other, to give it meaning, to complement it, but also to be in opposition to it, kind of like yin and yang. And so they call that the Samvādi. So the Vādi is the place of union, that's the self. The Samvādi is where the soul encounters its complement. It creates resonance, that's how you get harmony. If it's just one note, obviously, there's no harmony. So the richness comes through with this contrary. It's not a fight, it's not an opposition necessarily. It's more about complement, so how certain notes complement each other. And then the other notes are like companions or trials, steps along the way, part of a journey. It's really kind of a meditation cycle on using the notes as a way to feel the self. That's where it's rooted at. And usually at the end of a raga cycle, it will return back to the Vādi. And we can translate this into the Western system and think that the Vādi is the root note of the scale, whatever the tonic is. But in the raga system, it varies. Sometimes it's different other notes depending on what kind of rasa or feeling or mood you want to create. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. But what's really, I think, beautiful and profound about the Indian classical music system is how it connects it to a meditation cycle. And, if we just take the notes of the scale, let's say that we make the tonic in the key of C, the Vādi, that's the home, the spiritual center. So I relate this too to when I'm meditating, I have the the basic awareness that I hopefully am starting with. You know, when you first sit down on the cushion or wherever you're meditating, you can meditate anywhere. It's that first moment of connecting with the basic awareness of our minds, of awareness itself, of consciousness itself. And that's kind of the ground zero. That's before any thoughts pop up. That's before the ego creeps in. So if we can get to that state, and then as other things crop up, they take you away from that, and they take you on some kind of meditation cycle or journey. So you have your basic awareness, you are in it, maybe you have some stillness there, and then there's some movement that happens, and you have a thought, or you have some kind of sensation, and that takes you outside of the self into something else. But then you return back to it, and you are reawakened by that return. So it's not just like, oh, I screwed up, I forgot what I was doing, and I was taken away, and I forgot my basic awareness. That sometimes can happen, obviously, if you go into daydreams and you get hooked and you get started in this mind stream. But even if you go on that long trail of thoughts and live all these kind of situations out, like, oh, I'm going to tell that person off as soon as I get to work, and you imagine all these things that are going on, in your head, and then you snap back into here, now, in the present. It's richer because you have that revelation that, oh, that was outside, and then, aha, I'm back here. So it has even more power than when you just started with that basic awareness. So if we think about the scale that way, and we think about the overtone series, the one that is the most resonant is, of course, the tonic, the 1, and then remember the 5 is also very, very resonant. So those two together. So I could think of those as Vādi and Samvādi. Every Vādi needs somebody to love, right? All right, dad jokes abound. All right, so if that's root, and then as I go away, this could be just like an inkling of a thought, and then I can come back. Taking away, so each note is like going away from one of these little nodes of resonance of the self, of the basic awareness. So you can think of those 3 notes of the triad, the 1, the 3, and the 5, which are the most resonant in the overtone series, as being that self. But when you go away from it, is creating tension, it's creating otherness, it's creating interest and challenge for the self. But then you return back to the self. And that's what the musical expression is about, is you have home, going away from home, and then returning back to home. But you are a richer, more developed person for having gone on the journey. So when you go, there's home, away from home, away from home, away, really far away, and then it feels so good to be back at home. So just like, in a journey, it's home, away from home, this is like self, away from self. Self-thought, getting lost in thought, and then coming back. And that's really what the meditation cycle is, and that's what people do for hours and hours and hours as they're sitting on the cushion, is this, to put it very simply in a nutshell, is this awareness, stillness, moving out of it, movement, and then coming back to it. And then eventually, when you get to kind of the higher level and more profound ways of looking at it, you realize it's all the same, that going away, the movement and the stillness it's basically the same thing. It's all awareness. Anyway, so that's just this kind of esoteric view of the scale that I thought I'd share. So it's interesting to think about that. If you want to try this as a meditation, just play through the scale and think about it that way. And as you go up, feeling that otherness, and then back to awareness, otherness, back to awareness, other, and then back. All right, well, I hope that's useful, or at least gives you food for thought as you are playing with these scales and developing motifs and different melodic ideas. Best of luck with your songwriting, and I'll see you next time on Muse in Measure.